Wow, has it been a while since we talked Arlo? It's been a while since we talked like a YouTube channel in general because I think this year has been kind of lackluster when it comes to games, right? There hasn't been a whole lot of releases, and so I don't really think I've talked about anything outside of Princess Peach Showtime. Unicorn Overlord wasn't religiously hated the way that a lot of major Nintendo releases this year have been. And although the major YouTubers didn't talk about Unicorn Overlord, it has a pretty good reputation and people like it. But with like Princess Peach Showtime, there was this really weird agenda right from the get go to try and downplay this game, try and attack it, try to condemn Nintendo in good feel, and make Princess Peach look like her big game was some big major letdown. It wasn't. It's one of the best releases this year. I'm a big advocate for Princess Peach Showtime, and probably possibly the biggest, as a matter of fact. But now we're at this point. Arlo and other YouTubers are returning from their big event at PAX East, and now they're making YouTube content again, and now, almost a full week after release, they are now releasing videos on The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom. Keep in mind, I finished this game in like 2 days. Well, 2.5 days. I blasted through it, did a ton of side content, explored the entire world, did every boss entirely on stream. Loved it. Echoes of Wisdom was phenomenal. Nothing but an absolute banger. But Arlo is coming out trying, trying to downplay the release. I don't know why he's doing this. Like, did Nintendo not cut him a big enough check? But like, we're gonna have to like talk about this because this is a really good example as to how completely out of touch with reality most Nintendo YouTubers are right now. So let's go ahead and talk.
Hello, my friends. We are here today to talk about The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom. I already did a first impressions video, but that was based literally only on playing like the 10, 15, maybe 20-minute demo at PAX. Obviously, I've gotten my hands on the real game now, and I've played a pretty good amount. I couldn't give you like a percentage completed or anything, but you know, I've played a good amount of the game.
The game's been out. The game's not that long, okay? Like, it's like 20 to 30 hours. Like, I beat it in a weekend, right? This guy is supposedly a professional YouTuber who can't take the time, who is part of Nintendo's partnership program, who should be getting these games early, right? Who had all the time in the world to put out his review and like coverage of the game, and he's only just now starting to cover it, right? Like, how is this possible? Like, but anyway.
I've done a good handful of dungeons, so I've gotten a real taste of just of it and how it works. And so yeah, just to kind of tide you over while you wait for the full review. And on that note, I really don't want to wait a long time. It does I know I have a lot of reviews that I still owe.
I put out a review like a couple of days ago. What is he doing? Like,
You and so I'm making this top priority. I'm focused squarely right now on playing the game, beating the game, and then I'm going to be writing the script and getting it into production as soon as I possibly can. I'm not going to really try not to wait on this one. So the thing about this video, though, my impressions, it's kind of like I don't know how I will ultimately feel about the game, and I don't want to just drop this on you and make you feel super worried that you're just waiting for a review that is going to end up being really critical. You know, I don't I don't want to. I recognize that most people are absolutely loving the game, and I don't want to be like the spoil sport. I don't want to be like the one guy who goes against every other opinion on the planet. You know what I'm saying? I don't want to wreck anyone's day, ruin their fun. I don't want you to be super worried that I'm hating it and I'm just gonna cook up this big nasty review or anything. But I will admit though, at this moment, at least where I am in the game, my opinions so far, they are a bit mixed. And I'm sad to say that. I am sad to admit that. I want to enjoy games, you know. I don't like sure I've made a career complaining about games, but generally speaking, I like it best. I prefer when I play a game and I love it and I love everything about it and it's great and it's a big happy day. You know, I don't want to be that guy, especially with a game like this. It's Zelda and it's Zelda herself's first game and everyone is loving it. So yeah, I don't know. I just want to be upfront. I'm feeling a little critical. I'm feeling pretty mixed on the game so far. I think a lot of my initial worries have kind of ended up feeling kind of legitimate. You know, just certain things about how fiddly the game can be, selecting echoes, and just the entire concept of creating the echoes and kind of managing them.
There is absolutely nothing wrong with the inventory system. You have a variety of options to cycle through the echoes reasonably quickly, right? You know where everything is, you know how to utilize it, you can calculate based on like how much the cost is of what you're looking for, right? Like again, this is just a big cope. I've been saying this since like Tears of the Kingdom came out because this seems to be the new big thing for like Pretendos. Like, oh, the menus are slightly cumbersome, but like it's just them like reaching. I've said this several times, but there is nothing wrong with the menu system in these games.
It is more cumbersome than I would like, and I think that really might be like one big thing about this is there's just kind of like this kind of feeling throughout the game that it never quite clicks for me. It's fun. It's definitely fun to be using the echoes. Like there's a lot of value to it, but there's just this like, I don't know, this sense that I keep asking myself, was this all worth it though? Is this all working as well as I feel like it should as well?
The answer to that is yes, right? The echoes are very interesting. They add a lot to the game. The game has this really unique, fun feel to it, right? There is nothing wrong with the echo system, right? If the game has any problems at all, it's the overworld and like the still world sections can be kind of boring at times. But like when it comes to general gameplay, like no, it's phenomenal.
Well as they want it to. And I think a really big problem for me is it just kind of feels like I've not run into as much clever design as I was looking for. Because, like, this is a very...
What do you talk? Clever design? Like, I've played the entire thing. I know what the game is like. I know how the dungeons are set up. I know everything about it. Like, the dungeons are good, right? The game is entertaining, right? You have a lot of flexible ways in which you can use your echoes to progress, right? Like, clever design. Like, if anything, the game is, because it's so original and nothing like it has ever been done before, it has extraordinarily good design, right? They can't I imagine this was a problem for the developers. Like the reason it's not as complex as something like Tears of the Kingdom was because like something like this has never really been done before, right? They had to keep it like relatively straightforward and understandable with like the new mechanics, and I could totally see why.
Very puzzle heavy game. This is a puzzly game, you know, like this giving you all of these elements, all of these echoes to play with. Like, this really is, I mean, overall, it is doing what I wanted the next 2D Zelda to do. You know, if Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, it's all open, and everything is really big. And with Echoes of Wisdom, it did introduce an element of openness because of this whole, like, oh, all these problems have multiple solutions, and you can spawn any item you want. So, like, there's an element of openness to it, but overall, it is very puzzly. It is really...
Who can Again, this is like Sean Malmstrom's tire stuff. Like, oh no, not the puzzles. Like again, this is something you hear like a lot of like older people say is that like the puzzles are holding Zelda back. This should be an action RPG like Dark Souls. This pussified, Mike Matei called it. And like it's just so completely off base because this the puzzle aspect of Zelda is a big reason why this series constantly is able to innovate and able to introduce new elements and aspects, right? You're not using items in most combat situations, you're using them to solve puzzles, right? Like it gives a new additional layer to the gameplay. No, you are not losing out on crazy combat situations because of the emphasis on puzzles. If anything, like the inclusion of puzzles is a major reason why Zelda is objectively superior to FromSlop, right? Is that all you do in FromSlop is just run forward and attack enemies, but in Zelda you actually have to interact with the world in a more cohesive way, right? Again, I always emphasize just how little the the complaints about Zelda's puzzles really amount to anything, right? Again, it's just like with the menu thing. Like, these people are just reaching to try and find something to complain about. Like, oh no, I had to think. Like,
focusing in on just, I mean, you know, the echoes, the raw elements. And it has traditional dungeons, and so you're in these puzzle rooms doing these puzzles and making your way through dungeons. So I should say, like, as far as that goes, it is succeeding. It is succeeding, like, format-wise, in being the kind of 2D Zelda that I was looking for. But at least where I'm at in the game, I'm kind of just, like, hoping that it's ramping up. You know, I'm hoping that it's going to keep increasing in complexity, in the kinds of ideas that it presents, because I'm just waiting for that cleverness. I'm waiting for that moment where I come up with what feels like a very novel solution, and there's that.
Happened to me dozens of times throughout my playthrough, right? You can find that clip of me like fumbling around with like that giant alcove like above the ground, right? Where like I set up a platform, that a rising and falling platform, put like a leaf blower on it, and then got like a bat or something, and then just glided upward, right? Like, I was trying at that for like what, 20-30 minutes, right? And I got like no reward for doing that, right? Like, it was just like an ingredient thing. The game is filled with moments like that. So like, this idea that like, oh no, I don't get anything out of experimenting with the mechanics, complete and total lie, right? Because you do have to think about enemy matchups. You do have to think about like how cost effective certain things are, right? You know, your strategies are constantly evolving as your moveset and try evolves, right? You can use more echoes and you can cast more spells, right? So have more on the field at once, right? Like, you are not limited the way he's implying, right? And this is like a big major thing to me, is that like the instant that Echoes of Wisdom deviates from the Breath of the Wild formula, you have people like this coming out and say it's so simple, like it's so boring, it's so linear, and like it's just a big cope, right? Because objectively speaking, the game is very, very good.
Big aha moment, you know, that click, that thing, and you do it, and you go, oh, that's just, oh, it's so clever, you know, Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, that thing where it all clicks and it just feels so good.
Yeah, Breath of the Wild is now like the new Ocarina of Time, right? Like, this is the same thing we did with like the Zelda cycle back in the day, is that like, you know, Majora's Mask came out, oh, it's not as good as Ocarina. You know, Wind Waker came out, not as good as Ocarina. You know, Twilight Princess came out, not as good as Ocarina, right? Like, again, you couldn't escape it, right? Again, you weren't allowed to like celebrate everything good that these games contributed, right? Like, to this day, you still see people complaining about the clock and about the visuals in Wind Waker, right? You weren't allowed to appreciate these games for what they were. Like, all anybody wanted to do was just complain about how like it wasn't as good as Ocarina. We're at the point now where we're seeing people like this surface with modern Zelda games, right? We're seeing people like this downplay games like Echoes of Wisdom in favor of like propping up Breath of the Wild. And of course, like, Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are like two of the best games ever made. Nobody's disputing that, right? Like, they are phenomenal games. But this is the toxic mindset of the Pretendos, right? This is what I'm talking about when I say these people are like just completely out of touch with reality. Like, why they're trying to push an agenda. Like, they will not celebrate everything that Echoes of Wisdom does well. All they can do is like manufacture complaints and just whine and complain about things that really, really do not matter.
And it kind of feels like that's what this game is supposed to be, because it's so focused on these player-driven answers to puzzles. And I've just not really had that yet. Every solution so far has mostly just...
How far is he into the game? Okay. Like, I legit it might be possible he hasn't even cleared the first dungeon yet. It's possible. Like, the way he's describing this, I'm just kind of like, this doesn't seem right. Like, I can't imagine anybody's actually played the game for any length of time and would complain about the puzzles, right? It's just something that just seems like completely off base and something that nobody would actually agree with.
It's been very obvious and very like, oh, well, you know, it's one of these, so you spawn this, because that's what you always do when there's one of those. You spawn this, and, you know, oh, yeah, it's one of those guys. Okay, well, you just use that. Oh, I gotta get over there. Okay. Beds. Beds. It's beds. You know, they made a joke about it. They joked about it in the trailers, and it was kind of funny. And I'm kind of feeling like it's less funny now. It's kind of like, I feel like...
yeah, how dare Zelda make bridges with beds. Yeah, so, like, he hasn't gotten to Hebra, right? He hasn't gotten the Cloud yet, which is objectively better. But, like, this is his mindset, right? This is legit what he's, like, telling people right now, is that, like, oh, man, you have to summon beds to cross gaps. Like, okay, that's true, but what about all the other things you can do, right? Like, again... It's just coping and seething. It is just trying to manufacture controversy about a really, really good video game.
Like 90% of my time with the game is just beds. It's just climbing places using beds. Because the beds are the best, because you can jump on them and they're long. It's not just a table, so you can kind of stack them. So, yeah, it's basically just been a whole lot of puzzles that feel very straightforward. And kind of like the answers are usually obvious. You know, like a good little like kind of handful in there of ones that I kind of had to figure out, but it still didn't lead to that aha moment. That thing that has kind of proven why the game is this way. You know, like, that's it. I don't think the game has done as good of a job as I would like so far, just so far, of proving to me definitively the value of this whole system, this whole formula, the whole...
What is he talking about? The game needs to... You know how back in the Wii U days, where, like, Nintendo was putting out all these bangers on Wii U, and, like, game journals, like, manufactured that mindset, like, oh, but we don't have a justification for the gamepad, right? You legit saw, like, people downplaying games like Tropical Freeze because, like, well, the gamepad hasn't justified itself yet. Like, what does that have to do with the game itself, right? Again, this game can't be something different. It can't be original. It can't be be a little bit different. Instead, like, oh no, it has to justify itself. Like, the end product justifies itself, right? The fact that it exists justifies itself, right? Again, you are asking for something that is pretty self-evident, right? Like, oh, why did we get to play as Zelda, and why do we have a magic wand? Because they came up with these mechanics. Like, again, they came up with a Zelda game where you play as Zelda. Like, what is so difficult to understand about this?
Echo thing. It has mostly just kind of felt like a thing to do. It is a hook. It is different, and it is fun, and there is a novelty to it.
Okay, so that's the justification. It's fun. Okay, you don't need anything more than that, you Muppet.
Just kind of waiting for it to click a little more. It hasn't quite clicked for me. So because it hasn't clicked, like I said before, I'm kind of struggling with the fiddliness of it, of always having to hunt through my echoes, and there's really no good way to sort or categorize them. And
Nope. You don't. There aren't that many echoes. You have a multiple ways to sort through them by cost, by type, by the time you learned them, right? Like, it's just a simple matter of knowing where everything is.
and just, I don't know, just the whole concept. It's just not quite there yet. Now, I'm remaining hopeful. I'm keeping these blue fuzzy fingers crossed that things do just kind of increase. I mean, it's a Zelda game. Like, of course, the difficulty is going to go up. The complexity of the puzzles is going to go up. So I'm remaining hopeful, and I am still having fun. That's the thing. I really do have to specify here. Even if it hasn't really clicked that much, of course it's still fun. It's still Zelda, you know? Zelda's fun to play. You know, even when the puzzles are quite easy, 2D Zelda is just, it's just a joy. It's just fun. And yeah, there is the novelty of spawning these echoes, and that leads to some novel encounters. Yes, there is something novel about creating these elements of the world in any way that you want, or, you know, jumping up onto trees and feeling like you're going out of bounds, or spawning enemies and watching them fight other enemies. Like, that's fun. That's something we've never had in a Zelda game before, exactly. It's just creating an enemy and watching it just wreck a bunch of other enemies. Like, that is cool. And it's, you know, it's fun to explore Hyrule. It is really big. It is really big, and I like that. And there is something nice about how big and spread out it is. It's, you kind of just, you have time to take a breath, you know? Most 2D Zelda games are so densely packed, and I think that really works for them, but there is a novelty to just kind of spreading it out a bit. I think I wish there were more secrets. That is another thing where I need to play more of the game and explore more of the map before I can definitively say. It does feel like it's a little light on good secrets, considering these big stretches of area. You're kind of just going over them, and I'm like kind of waiting for something to pop up, waiting to see a cave or something, but sometimes it really is just a big open area for running through, which is weird. It's different for a 2D Zelda game, and I guess, I don't know. I gotta just wait and see on that one, I guess. The performance is horrible.
Nope, but
it.
Nope, complete and total lie. I don't know why YouTubers are doing this, because I saw this like in my chat too, like, oh, it runs so badly. What are you talking about, you dipshit? Maybe on your pirated copy on a Ryujinx that's never going to be patched, right? But on the actual hardware, it's perfectly fine. Anybody who says this game runs badly is completely delusional. It is completely wrong.
It stinks. It stinks. You can even see my live reaction when I when I booted up the game for the first time. I streamed it. Oh, nuts! I never uploaded that. Okay, well, you can't see it yet, but I'm I'm gonna upload it on Arlo Plays, and yeah, you can see my reaction. It's worse in the beginning of the game. It's not quite a fair representation. You start out in Castletown, and the performance is really terrible there. So it's not quite that bad throughout the rest of the game, but it is it's still bad.
What?
What? I've been tempted to do like just a video on that. Like, I knew I wanted to do an early impressions, but I'm thinking like I kind of want to do just to talk about the frame rate too. I don't know if I will yet.
I am sick of hearing people try to complain about frame rates, right? Because this is like the king of cope, right? This is like the absolute biggest reach that a Pretendo channel can make to try and downplay a Nintendo game. Like, oh, it doesn't run very well. Like, come on. Like, completely delusional. Like, what? Like, Ocarina of Time ran at, like, what? 25 FPS on N64 or something? Like, it doesn't matter, right? To me, this is, like, something that nobody should talk about or care for at all. Like, it's just a complete deflection. Like, let's not talk about the game. Let's talk about my frames. Like, it is pathetic and really needs to be called out more. Especially since, like, having a higher frame rate doesn't necessarily make the game better. But just look at Sonic Adventure on PC. Like, if you don't, like, adjust it and cap the frames, like, you end up going way too fast. The game ends up running way too fast, and, like, you end up, like, just screwing up. It's a legit problem.
I kind of don't want to start the argument. I don't like arguments, you know? That's the kind of thing where all the comments are just going to be arguing and people telling me I'm a hypocrite for thinking that the frame rate wasn't a problem in Paper Mario, but it is a problem here. I wish I didn't have to explain why that is not hypocritical. Paper Mario is an artistic choice. It was consistent. The problem here is that it's inconsistent, and that's what
Oh man, because Paper Mario did it, it's perfectly fine. What a shill. Oh man, I bet if Origami King did it, like he would be complaining about that. But suddenly, look, oh no, like we can't criticize the Thousand Year Door. Come on, bro. Come on.
I
Vivian's totally trans.
can't stand about it. That's always been a thing for me. I'm not as much of a frame rate snob. I think
Vivian is male, by the way. But anyway,
I'm kind of getting there. I'm getting to the point where I am starting to, like, at least versus the beginning of the Switch generation, I do care more about frame rate now than I used to. But overall, for me, it's not so much a thing of, like, having high frame rates. It's keeping them consistent. I don't even care if it's low, if it's at least consistently low. But when you swing wildly, like this game does, from, like, 60 FPS, like, really nice and smooth, down to, like, 20 something, like really choppy. It's horrible.
never happens.
It is awful.
Never
and it genuinely mars the game experience. Not enough to like break it, but it is like it feels a little bit, it's like a small version, a much smaller and more reasonable version of like Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, where it's just kind of like
Okay. So no problem at all then. Okay, Scarlet and Violet has had no issues whatsoever, right? Even though like the online community insisted it did, it was perfectly flawless, right? No issues at all. You know, Elden Ring runs worse, right? So this is the same boat then. So you're saying that nothing is wrong with this game, but we're just gonna pretend like it is because we need to find something to complain about. Okay, like every single Nintendo release. Okay, like, I'm sure if you look hard enough, you can find people complaining about Princess Peach's Showtime's frame rate. But...
am I playing a Nintendo game right now? You know, like, just like Nintendo, they do usually have a standard of quality, and this kind of inconsistent performance is not something I'm used to seeing in a Nintendo game. It's just...
But you just complained about Scarlet and Violet! Like, are you gonna, like, try and argue that's not a Nintendo game? Because... oh, it's Game Freak. Like, come on. Like, this wasn't even made by Nintendo. This was made by Grezzo. So, again, like, come on.
It's weird. I mean, like, Link's Awakening remake is one thing, but, like, this, obviously, like, Aonuma and the Zelda team, they had their hands all over this. It was made by Grezzo, but this is still... This is a mainline Zelda game. And I cannot fathom why it runs like this. It's just so inconsistent. It plummets so regularly, and it swings so wildly. It's not even, it's a variable frame rate, but it's not even like, it doesn't just kind of rise and fall as things happen. Instead, it just tanks. Suddenly, in certain places, it just tanks, and then will skyrocket up, instantly back up to 60, and it's disorienting. Sure, when it's running at 60, it's nice.
So what I'm getting from this is that it consistently runs at 60, but he's just inventing the dips that don't actually happen. Because I can tell you, like, nothing like that happened in my playthrough.
Now, I hate to say that I prefer it to just not ever be at 60, because, like, why would you do that? Wouldn't you rather it was sometimes at 60? But I don't know. If they just capped it at 30, even with the lower dips, because when it dips, it's lower than 30. I'm pretty darn sure it's lower than 30. I think that would still be better. I think I'd probably take that. A lowish frame rate that sometimes gets a little lower versus this one. Swings up and down like crazy, and it's really distracting, and I really don't like it. I think it's a really bad thing. I don't know. Yeah, not killing the game. It's not making it like, you shouldn't buy this, but it is like, what happened? Why is this a problem? I just don't get it, but, yeah, I won't talk more about that unless I do a whole video on it. I don't know if I will. We'll see. I am liking how dark-ish the game can be, though. It's not a dark game. It's not a serious game. It's really just this whole rift thing, and I am really enjoying that aspect because essentially it's all non-dangerous, so it's not really that dark, No one's dying.
What? What is it? What do you mean? Oh, it's dark. But it's not that dark? Like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, that's a direct contradiction. What do you mean by this? Like,
you save them, you go in a rift and you save everybody, but, like, while it's happening, It's pretty dark, seeing all the people frozen in midair and they're dripping, and you know that if you don't save them, then eventually they'll disappear. Like, it's cool. I don't know. I really like that element of it. And, you know, it's almost like they're only playing with something that dire because the game is so colorful. So it kind of disarms the game in a way. You know, if this were like a realistic or like Twilight Princess looking Zelda that did the same thing, this would be freaky. It'd be scary. So like the chibi colorful style kind of lets them do this, but then in its own way that itself is scary because you're seeing these cute little characters and they're frozen in horror. They're like, I don't know. I just think it's fun. I'm really enjoying that part. I guess I should end it there just because I should end it somewhere. I do have to make a video that ends, and, you know, obviously I could talk about the game for hours because I'm very opinionated, and I've been playing a Zelda game, and I got a lot of opinions about it, but I'm going to try to keep it kind of surface level there. To summarize, I am having fun. It is fun.
Yeah, okay, but you spent the entire 18-minute video, like 16.5-minute video, like, trying to tell us the game is terrible for like these really arbitrary fake reasons, right? I didn't hear a single valid complaint in this entire time. And I've played more than Arlo has, obviously. So yeah, like I this is why I can't stand Arlo as a personality, is that like for whatever reason he's gonna try and come after Echoes of Wisdom. Like, does he think this game is like diverting resources from Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door 2? I don't know. Like,
I think I was looking for more, and I'm hoping there's more. I'm not so sure about this whole Echoes thing. I'm waiting for it to really click. I'm just waiting for it to prove itself. And I guess we will just see what happens. Thank you for watching. I hope that you are having fun playing the game. Statistically, you probably are. You know, I look through, like, comments and stuff, and, you know, I think there are people like who share opinions with me, but at least according to the Nintendo Life poll that they did, asking everyone what they would rate it so far, it was like 90-something% of people were like 8 and up. So, so yeah.
Yeah, the game has been like really well received, way better than Princess Peach Showtime, I think. Probably because let's see, is it still there? Yeah, probably because Tears of the Kingdom was so downplayed. There has to be like some push and pull there, right? You can't just like downplay Tears of the Kingdom, gaslight people into thinking it's not as good as Baldur's Gate 3, and then turn around and like shit on Echoes as well. Yeah. So what they seem to be doing is like they're allowing Echoes to be well received so they can like downplay Zelda again when it really matters. Is my thing. Because if they downplay Zelda every single time, it becomes this issue where like people start noticing the bias and start calling it out. So yeah, Echoes has been shockingly well received. I would even go so far as to say like it doesn't even deserve the praise it gets, because this game does have problems. There are like real valid things to talk about, right? But you didn't get that here, right? Like, again, this is my issue with like most Pretendo YouTubers, is that like none of their points have any merit whatsoever. It's all like superficial, like surface level thing. Like, oh man, the Echoes don't justify themselves. Like, okay, like why don't you talk about the dungeon structure? You know, I remember when I did the second dungeon, you know, the water one. I remember like being kind of disappointed in the setup and like how it was just like, okay, go in 4 directions and then unlock the boss door. Like, I thought that was kind of lame, right? You know, there are things like about the dungeons you can talk about that are kind of underwhelming or don't like come together very well. You know, I talked about how like nothing really happens when you go see the Deku scrubs. You know, those male and female scrubs like, just being ridiculous, right? Like I talked about that when I reviewed the game, right? You know, a lot of the you know that was a big aspect for me, is that like a lot of the NPCs don't really have a lot of compelling storylines, even if they are likable characters, right? Again, that was a trend with this game, is that like the setup, the characters are great, but there's no real payoff, and the game kind of ends kind of suddenly, right? You know, I was really expecting like one final dungeon before the end, but you know, like it. All in all, the game was just really well put together, and it was at its core a lot of fun, right? You know, there are things you can talk about that the game doesn't do all that well, that that Tears of the Kingdom did a lot better. I did say immediately that like Tears of the Kingdom was better than this. Breath of the Wild was better than this, but like A Link Between Worlds was better than this. But like, this is a new Zelda from a team that previously worked on Triforce Heroes. The people who put out the worst selling Zelda game of all time, right? So like the fact that they can go from that to like a really well received like top down Zelda is really really impressive, right? And people should be excited for Grezzo and like the future of the company and what they're going to put out. But no, instead of talking about that, we have Arlo trying to complain about my menus and my frame rate. Like it's just completely appalling. The Muppet needs to be moved to a location where no one can stick his hand up his ass and make him bleat whatever nonsense he needs to say that day, right? The Muppet needs to go away.